Our X-Files. Welcome to our X-Files vault. Regular people talking about unexplained phenomena. UFOs. Ghosts. Cryptids. Hidden archaeology. Weird science. Our stories. Our takes. Our X-Files vault.
So, hey, welcome to the Paranormal Conspiracy Paracon podcast. I'm Pat.
I'm Callan.
And this week we're covering something that's well known, but not certainly well known outside of Canada. I'm from California. I never heard of this, but I'm sure, Callan, this is pretty familiar around where you're at.
Relatively, yeah. It was, I first started hearing about this particular story from a coworker, actually, who her family has lived in the Nanaimo area for generations. Nanaimo being one of the main cities on Vancouver Island on the far west coast of Canada, in British Columbia. And so her family was around when this was taking place in the first third of the 20th century. And nobody talks about it really. I mean, I was shocked to hear it. So I'm hoping that people from not my geographical area are going to be really interested in this because almost the entire story took place just miles around Nanaimo, there where I lived for 8 years until just recently, and even now from Vancouver, the greater Vancouver area, people are going to be a lot more familiar with. It's still just a couple hours of travel away. So it's pretty interesting story, pretty big by Canadian standards, and it's kind of had a resurgence or a re-excitement about it. There's some articles being posted more recently because some of the property involved in the story, and everybody will hear just how involved later on, but some of the property involved in the story was put up for sale just in the last 5 years, and it's kind of a fun story, so it gets wrapped up in the real estate listings and things like that. But enough beating around the bush. The story we're going to tell is that of Edward Arthur Wilson, who is a man who went by many names during his life, but most famously, he's known as Brother 12. And he had a cult, more or less, to his name, and all sorts of mysterious happenings.
So, I mean, we're talking about a cult leader here, and this is property that had people like living kind of like some Jonestown type of cult. I guess
Quite right.
This
yes.
could be the Canadian equivalent of Jonestown, and it seems like a situation that we're seeing. Like, I mean, I know I did a little looking and saw that the price sold, like they sold the property for $2.2 million. I thought that was that's pretty insane, and also just the fact that, hey, buying, like, I think it was something like 180 acres of land that got sold. It was like 40 something hectares.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's pretty removed, and mostly farmland now. There's been a couple generations of families that have come and gone since Brother 12's time that have developed the land, but it's still, widely regarded as, the place where all these things happened, and is interesting for that reason. So it's hard to say how that affects the property value, but it certainly gets it attention, and there's no such thing as bad publicity necessarily.
I'm sure there's places in somewhere in Toronto, somewhere in Vancouver, anywhere in Canada in general, that when you're looking at hundreds of acres of land, you're still probably looking at a price tag well over 2.2 million. I don't know. It's possible that the idea that you're looking at like this property is associated with a notorious cult and possible like murders and disappearances and all these other things that we're going to get into. But like realistically speaking, I don't know. I would see it as something that could add value, like personally.
Historical value for sure. Yeah, I think that's the idea, at least from the real estate agent's perspective.
But at the same time, I think like I would also look at that situation in a way that's like almost like when I'm selling the house, it's like, yeah, there was a murder in the house, so and then it's like like you kind of have to like polish and smooth the deal out a little bit more in the buyer's favor, because it's like you're dealing with a murder and you're dealing with like, or if there was a suicide, like anything involving death instantly like pulls people away from it, because like we're dealing with things like the paranormal here, right? And you're looking at a situation where like I don't want to be in a place where there could be like ghosts that or spirits that haven't moved on from this life and have like unfinished business, quote unquote, and want to sit here. Even if I'm not sitting there as a personal believer in ghosts or whatever at that time, I still wouldn't want to be in the same room where some guy hung himself, like.
True. Yeah. It's well, it works both ways, I think, though, because we'll hear towards the end of the story that there's a lot more things that went on this property than spooks and rituals and things like that. There's going to be the possibility for historical artifacts, maybe even valuable treasure. It's kind of a notorious place with treasure hunters and things like that. Spoilers, but we'll get there. But I think it's just a mystery. There's so much unknown that I think you're right. I think it would probably detract a lot of interest knowing some of the grim details, but I think overall it's a net gain. I think it's pretty desirable.
Yeah,
property.
And also like talking on unknown, that just like gets me into this like topic I really want to touch on for everyone like coming and tuning in and listening. Our topics remain unexplained, and because the facts aren't all there and we don't have like really what we're coming at you with is like the same that like, not to undervalue what we're doing here, but it's the same that most people could come at you with like any amount of research and time. We're not by any means experts in the field that we're talking about.
Mhm.
We just feel like these are things that interest us. These are things that we think are going to interest other people and stuff. So if you like are someone who is interested in this, like, and invested in this kind of topic, you're invested in doing research on cults, you're invested on doing like research on these like paranormal conspiracies and things like that, and you're an expert in that field, we definitely like encourage you to reach out to us. Definitely join us on the Discord for conversation in the future. I believe we're going to have that in the link. Our personal emails in the link, and we're going to just have like ways for you to reach out to us and like actually open the floor for discussion, because right now we're at a level where we can do that, and we want to have like people who are really invested and educated in this to come on, make this a platform where we can talk about these topics that I know don't get by any means the notoriety or the like publicity, and they just don't get talked about enough. So yeah, definitely look forward for that, and we'll be able to come back and like do like revisit a topic. I know like we just have only done 2 so far, but like I'd really love to go back and talk about the Alaskan Triangle with someone from Alaska, someone who like actually knows what they're talking about from there. Like I want to know someone who's like lived. I know they're going to probably be old as shit, but I mean someone who's lived in the time around like where Brother 12 was like a big deal. Like he was closer to being touched like in the 60s, someone who grew up in Vancouver or Edimo or like that area in that like time. I'd like love to hear from one of those some people from there. So like just being said, putting that out there, reach out. But yeah, back to what we were talking about. Go ahead, bro. Like Fill me
Yeah,
in.
definitely. I'll get into it, but you brought up a good point there. It's a shame, in a way, that I'm not still in Nanaimo and going to the university there, because I know that there are local records like microfiche, old news articles, and things like that concerned with Brother 12 and his activities. So it would have been good to have some hard source material rather than digital research to go off of, but we've got what we've got. And we've got quite the chronology to walk everybody through here. So we're going to take it step by step, go in chronological order. We're going to kind of branch off whenever we see a good opportunity to comment or something that catches our ear. But I think the way to do it is really step by step, the chronology of the story here. And things really get started. Literally get started in 1887, so that's the time frame we're dealing with in England. A well-off family. Brother 12, we're just going to call him Brother 12 because there's half a dozen names that he goes by over the course of his life. But he was raised Catholic apostolic, so very old school, very doom and gloom, right? But doesn't really follow in his family's footsteps. He decides on his own that he's going to become a naval apprentice, and studies of his own accord metaphysics, world religion. He's especially interested in the Theosophical Society, and we're not really going to get into the nitty-gritty details of what he believed and what he wrote about and what he was interested in, but suffice it to say that theosophy is mystic sort of philosophy that doesn't really do away with the Judeo-Christian stories, but is more interested in themes of oneness and spirituality, and it's a bit of a marriage of a bunch of different things.
It's definitely seems like, when I'm fairly familiar with theosophical like religions and studies like that. I took a couple classes in college. I mean, I'm not going to claim to be an expert, but I took a couple classes on like philosophy of Eastern religion and the philosophy of Western religion and Christianity and things like that. And theosophy in itself, you're kind of just like, it's a way of like adding that philosophical like it's during this enlightenment period when you have all these people like questioning why, but yet they're still trying to keep this like theological like sense, like you said, it not to do away with Christianity, because you have to incorporate Christianity into it in a sense in that time period, because to not, it would definitely get you ostracized. There were a lot of people in this time period that were heavily influenced by the occult and like esotericism and things like that's where you get a lot of these secret societies like Freemasons or I don't know, the Bohemian Club. I don't know a lot of them. I'm gonna do more research, but
not unrelated to the territory we're headed into here with Brother 12, so
let's get into it.
Yeah. 1907 is where we're going to jump to. 20 years old, now a captain. He finds himself in British Columbia, Canada, so far west, with his first family, emphasis on first. And it's interesting to think about what sorts of things he experienced when he was here as a 20-year-old that left an impression on him such that he would want to return for very specific reasons a little bit later in his life. But something about the area and his time in it inspires him to abandon his family, who return back overseas to New Zealand, I believe it was. And in 1912, specifically, that he experiences the first of many, well, I guess you could say visions is kind of the catch-all term. He experiences things and speaks with entities at various periods throughout his life. So in 1912, something that he terms a ceremony of dedication he has. And so he learns for the first time what he thinks is his spiritual calling, and causes him to abandon his family and he becomes kind of a vagrant, adopts a wanderer kind of a lifestyle, and continues to study, of course, as he goes, and returns overseas to Europe, and kind of nation hops and picks up what he can. And I was really interested in trying to find out where he was during World War One, because that's kind of glossed over in his history. It doesn't sound like he really participated, but I would have been interested to read about that. And especially, I tried to find out if he ever found himself in Egypt physically, because Egypt is going to become a very, very big deal to Brother 12. Um, Things really get going in 1924 when he's in France at this point. He's more or less destitute. His health is kind of failing, and he has some more important visions. He's contacted by Egyptian deities, and someone who refers to himself as the Master of Wisdom, who is one entity of a pantheon of entities known as the Great White Lodge, which is not something he came up with. It comes up in a couple different ways in other theosophic writings, but essentially the purpose of the Great White Lodge is to kind of from behind a curtain influence the development of humankind and human evolution.
Yeah, it kind of touches on that topic of the ascended masters and like these, kind of to touch on something that we're going to talk about in the future. A person from like my area has actually apparently had an alleged experience with an ascended master of the same accord, where they were, approached by someone in white robes that essentially ascended from like the ability to need a physical body anymore. They like they've mastered the physical plane. They've mastered all these things, and it's definitely interesting. But it's interesting how that falls into line other places around the world.
Yeah, it's definitely reminiscent. It's kind of like the inverse of the Great White Lodge, almost, who is, I don't think, was ever corporeal at any point, with the exception of, conveniently, this one entity that Brother 12 makes contact with. So it's the 12th out of a pantheon of 12, and the only one able to manifest physically, and is manifesting in Brother 12. He is the conduit for it. So this is where he gets the name Brother 12 that he starts to go by. And so this is the start of his new identity, and he spends several years in Europe, still traveling country to country, writing prolifically. He's got teachings now, doctrines, manifestos, various spiritual, philosophical opinion pieces, occult articles, and things like that, under a variety of pseudonyms. And he starts to develop a bit of a following, specifically some things he published in London, England's Occult Review, which was kind of ground zero for the English-speaking occult world at the time. He was relatively sensationalized and became, already at this point, he hasn't even gotten started. This is the tip of the iceberg, but he's already a major player in the occult world at this time. So with this wind at his back, he returns to British Columbia, Western Canada, in 1927, and establishes what he calls the Aquarium Foundation in Cedar, which is a small, it's hard to say if it was even a city at the time, but just on the outskirts of Nanaimo that I mentioned earlier. So he starts this community called Cedar by the Sea, which is going to host the Aquarium Foundation. And he starts acquiring property, and he has an official charter by the provincial governments. This is all sanctioned, and he sets up camp there, basically. And within a half a year, Brother 12 and the Aquarium Foundation have over 1,000 members across the continent, so mostly continental United States and Canada, some overseas though. And what's really interesting about that is that a large portion of them are very wealthy, almost high society, lots of doctors and intellectuals and industry head honchos, things like that, and all very easily charmed by him. He's a very charismatic figure, almost suspiciously charismatic, as we'll hear later. But a lot of these people, a lot of these characters are contributing exorbitant amounts of money to the Aquarium Foundation, and dropping their lives, dropping their jobs, moving to become a part of this community at Cedar by the Sea, starting like lavish building projects, like turning it into a proper community. And he undertakes a bunch of interesting endeavors from there once things are rolling. He's got a monthly magazine, which was called The Chalice, which is funny today, knowing what we know about stereotypical cult practices. But he used that as a platform. It was distributed on Vancouver Island and the Lower Mainland to preach his teachings and get his apocalyptic messages out there. So one of the focal points, I think, of his writings in the Aquarium Foundation was this sort of doomsday message, and his idea that he had been chosen as Brother 12 to guide humanity towards salvation and away from an assured judgment or destruction. And this community was going to be an ark. And so it was, salvation of people's souls was dependent upon their following him and moving there and doing whatever they could for the foundation.
Yeah, I actually was like seeing that it said on this website that Brother 12's 49th, he formed on his 49th birthday. The occasion marked a significant milestone. In just 6 months, the Aquarium Foundation had become the fastest growing spiritual group in North America.
Okay, there you go, yeah.
And another really sick thing that kind of like bugged me about it that I thought was like really weird, it says Brother 12 placed particular emphasis on the importance of the children to the work. The importance of the children to the work, stressing that they must be protected from pernicious influences of the outside world so that their spiritual natures could naturally unfold. It was the children and grandchildren of these children he predicted who would become the leaders and teachers in the great spiritual renaissance that would usher in the millennium.
Definitely, yeah. He's going to go so far as to make a prophecy very interested in childbearing in a minute here, but he had a timeline, like a long game timeline in his head about when these things were going to happen, and when specifically salvation was going to be at hand. And it's heavily implied, based on everything that I've read, that he believed that he was going to be an important player, but not necessarily around to lead the charge, that it was going to maybe fall on the next generation. So that's what he was trying to prepare people for with the Aquarium Foundation.
Yeah.
But more than that, it's hard to say really, because he had his fingers in all sorts of different pies. He tries to become political even, and not just Canadian politics, but American politics too. In 1928, he crosses the border, travels to Washington, D.C. During campaign times, and does his very best using his super effective charisma to align himself with anybody he can find that's not affiliated with or supported by one of the major parties. So anybody who's like a marginal movement or a marginal organization, think KKK, for example, and he tries to glue all these organizations together to try to get a ragtag third party moving and trying to get it to campaign. Obviously, it doesn't work. It fails on returns to British Columbia, Canada. But interesting that he had that in mind to kind of take things to the nth degree. The American election, and he's got to get involved if he can, sit on top of that throne. He's going to have a lot of influence. He's, leaves nothing to the imagination. He's got ambition, right? But while he's back, he's kind of done away with those ambitions for the time being, put him on the back burner while he's back in British Columbia now. He takes a mistress, or a not wife, I'm going to say, because there's, ritualistic pseudo marriages that happen at the foundation. He takes a not wife named Elma Wilson, but not long after has a very public affair with a woman named Myrtle Baumgarten, it's very significant because she is the wife of a prominent New York physician that he's coerced into, joining the foundation. And he claims very flatly that she is the reincarnation of Egyptian goddess Isis, and he is the reincarnation of the Egyptian god Osiris. And they are destined to be together, destined to produce a child, and this child is going to be, the one to usher in a new era of salvation and pilot the ark, so to speak. In 1975 specifically, he says this is going to happen. So he's got a full-blown prophecy on his hands. But things kind of go belly up because she can't, medically speaking, I don't know what the issue was, but there's 2 miscarriages that happen, followed by a mental breakdown on Myrtle Baumgarten's part, and she falls off the record at that point. So there's a few theories floating around that we'll come back to later in the story, what might have happened to her, but kind of rattling for the rest of his community that these things happen. They're all quite public, And to top this off, things also get very complicated legally for the Aquarium Foundation around this time. A woman enters the picture named Mary Wortham Connolly. She is one of the most wealthy devotees of the Aquarium Foundation. Acquisition of land is largely thanks to her. And she takes him to court over the misuse of a serious financial contribution, which was $25,000 in, amounts, meaning that in that day's time, but hundreds of thousands of dollars by today's standards. But during the court hearing, the court proceedings, after, getting this all underway, this professional court hearing, very unexpectedly, she kind of destroys her own case when she's providing testimony by stating that the money was freely gifted. So everybody's confused at this, that she would, deliberately say something that she must have known was going to destroy her own case.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's like, I feel like in a male-controlled society, and in an extent, there kind of is this point in time, especially back in the 20s, or whenever, I believe it was the 20s or 30s when this was taking place, and in that time period, I'm sure anytime a girl makes herself look stupid in a room full of egocentric men, it just is all of them are kind of did you really just do that to yourself? And there could have been a situation where she really thought in her head, now this is my valid case. The funny thing is, we don't even know what the misuse of the contribution was. What was it that he did that made him misuse this like contribution, that made her want to take him to court, because that's like so vague. And so then for her to like go into court thinking, okay, this is my thing, and she had no representation behind her that was going to say like, my client did this and that. No, she like went up in her own testimony, said like, oh, well, you know, I gifted him the money or whatever she said. She made it pretty much clear to everyone in the court that it was a consensual gifting of money, not a donation with expectations behind it. Like, this is for the church. This is for all this thing. Like, it was a gift to Brother 12 personally. Like, that's how she made it sound to everyone in that room. And
exactly. Yeah. I wish we had, you know, stenography records or something like that that may or may not exist, but it's court cases following this one that are gonna really make this one seem a lot more strange. If this were the only one, you know, it might not be worth noting.
Right.
But, things get pretty weird pretty quick here. So not only does she remain an on-again, off-again member of the foundation even after this, which is bizarre, right? But you know, further court cases open up and take place against Brother 12 and the foundation, specifically revolving around unpaid wages, and they get thrown out for similarly, you know, just strange circumstances. In this case, court members are noted to have been fainting, sobbing, convulsing during the proceedings. The judge lost his voice at one point altogether, and most seriously, the plaintiff's lawyer, at the critical moment of you know, standing up and delivering the argument, was completely unable to recall what he was there for, what the case was about, what he was supposed to be saying. And all these things taken together, it was widely believed that Brother 12 was using some sort of occult powers to survive the court cases that, you know, on the surface would not have probably gone in his favor. So this, I think, fueled the fire of a lot of local publicity and articles that were coming out around the time, accusations of black magic and witchcraft and strange happenings surrounding the foundation. One article I found from the period, giant headline, reads simply, "They sipped blood from a skull!" Exclamation point. So things like that, pretty zany accusations, but not all that zany, we'll find out. So these court cases lend a lot of spooky credence to the popular belief at the time. It's interesting that around the same time that these accusations start flying around, the first signs of dissent inside the foundation kind of coincide. I think the issue with prophecy failing and the affair that went on with poor Myrtle there had a pretty profound effect on a lot of the foundation's members and followers, and it became a little bit dicey for Brother 12 to keep things together. He obviously still had the numbers on his side, but you know, maybe not 100% confidence that there would have been prior to that. It's only a year later, 1929, that the foundation is dissolved, in name at least. Brother 12 rebrands as the Brothers Center and uses his vast wealth to purchase land on the nearby De Courcy Island and Valdez Island. So there's this colony now. It's no longer just seaside, but it's, you know, on the ocean. It's on these otherwise undeveloped islands, and so the arc metaphor becomes very real, and he continues to use that to grow his numbers, and that they have to come to the island, come to the community, come to the colony to be spared the coming destruction, and things like that. And this wealth that he has, I've probably been making it sound like it's all just in the form of donations. Like he's charmed all these well-to-do people across the continent and convinced them to give him money. But it's at every level of membership. He's making money. He's got a fixation with gold specifically. So a lot of the wealth that he's acquired, he converts to gold coin, and he asks of a lot of his initiates to convert their worldly possessions and whatever wealth they might personally own, to convert it to gold coin and offer it to the foundation. And so he's got all this gold coin, and he fills jars with it and buries them around the complex, inside the complex, around the island. And he's always moving them around. And he starts to become very paranoid, very bizarre behavior. So like literal treasure jars full of gold coin buried around the island is something he was very determined to do, to convert as much of his wealth as he could into this form. And of course, still writing madly while all this is going on. And it's not just off the wall stuff. He predicted the 1929 stock market crash, apparently, which a lot of people were impressed with. His numbers are still growing, of course. Sounds hard to believe at this point. No, at this point. In 1929.
Okay. I was gonna say, whoa.
Even so, I mean, hindsight, looking back, it's so wild that how could people still be buying into this?
Yeah.
But it just goes to show the power he had over people.
A lot of people have a sheep-like mentality, you know what I mean? Like, I talked about this before, and like even in regards back to his court case situation, you have a guy who runs a cult. Like, he's not a cult leader for no reason. Like, clearly he's a charismatic, like, nice to listen to, nice to talk to guy. When it's all exposed at the end of the day, we can look back, and hindsight is 2020, and we can say this guy is an evil piece of shit. He probably did some really messed up stuff and murdered one of his mistresses and
Maybe.
maybe. I mean, we don't know. But I mean, allegedly, he did some things that could be seen as pretty bad. But I bet if you were in that court case, in that courthouse, and you're listening to this guy defend himself, or you're listening to him talk about spirituality, I'm sure he had this like tone and nature about him that just drew people into him and like made it really easy for them to like him, easy for them to like want to see him win. And I mean, this is something I don't know if you said this earlier, but to even touch on the fact that the lady who was suing him for the misuse of a contribution and stuff stayed a member of his cult, like till the end, essentially.
I believe so.
Yeah. So it's not like she quit after that situation. Something about that drew her into staying part of that organization. It's really, really interesting how things like that work, and it also touches on to other cases. Like, we look at here in America, we have like Ted Bundy. Okay, I mean, he's not a cult leader, but he did really fucked up things that were being brought out in court, and when you saw it, you were like, okay, this guy killed tons of beautiful women. And then who did you turn around and see in the courtroom? Tons of attractive women. They were just like piling into the courtrooms to see him and hear him talk, hear him defend his case. Because, like, I don't know, something about him drew people in. And I know when I was watching some of his, like, when you're watching his documentaries, like, I feel like really stupid people, and even myself at one point was like, oh, I could see myself like hearing the charisma in his voice. I was like, really, wow, like that's actually kind of powerful even after he's dead. Like you could see what lures you into being interested into serial killers like that, because that they have this charisma, and it's really weird. It's only after they're gone that you get to look back at them and psychoanalyze and pick at the things that were like, okay, this is really strange. And we can ask questions like, his numbers are still growing at this point, and that seems odd to us, but maybe being in the same room as Brother 12 was like being on cloud 9. So I don't know. You know what I mean?
Have been.
It must have been.
You know?
Yeah.
It's it's easy to see where all these articles, where the inspiration for them came from. It's like it sounds supernatural. You know, the amount of influence and the degree to which he was able to influence people. It's spooky by itself. You know, the activities of the cult. Besides that. But back to what's going on here in 1929. He's still writing. He's taken a fresh look at Egyptian deities again, and now believes that the pharaoh, who's an actual pharaoh, Akhenaton, is one of his ancestors, or at least they shared a reincarnation.
So he's
line.
he is the reincarnation of Akhenaton.
Right. So this whole he's been chosen to be Brother 12, divine right to rule sort of mentality is still very much there. It's evolving a little bit, but still very much there. He hasn't lost any steam, and it should come as not much surprise that he at this point he takes on a new not wife, a new mistress by the name of Mabel Scottow, and they change their names. They have a ritual marriage, and he changes his name to Amiel de Valdez after the island, and she changes her name to the similar Azura de Valdez, which she truncates to Madame Z.
Yeah, Madame Z.
Her infamous title at the complex, and
I wish there was a way. Wish there was a way to get up. I have this picture right here of Madame Z, and if I could show you guys, like, she was a baddie.
Intimidating.
I mean, yeah, intimidating in a really powerful, feminine way. You know what I mean? But because there's a quote on her that says, they said, the female of the species is more deadly than the male, and it was like, that is kind of what they attribute to like her as a person. You know what I mean? I'm like,
yeah,
seeing
I think
that is sketchy.
That comes out for sure. It's not that long after they partner up. That in 1930 it is now. He returns from one of his regular trips to Europe and appears to have suffered a mental breakdown of his own at this point. And he begins to self-isolate and fly into fits of rage and becomes even more paranoid and dysfunctional. He goes so far as to arm and combat train members of the colony, and, camouflage the complex and fortify the complex against attack, like militarize it, which I don't think there was necessarily a threat that he needed to defend against, but it's just goes to show the conviction that he had, how much he believed his own rantings and ravings, and it's at this point that he's borderline dysfunctional, not much of a leader or a manager, that his partner Mabel / Zura / Madame Z takes over a lot of his duties, managerial duties, and the colony under her iron fist, let's say, becomes a lot like a work camp, and conditions reportedly sunk to levels comparable to slave labor or slave camps. So people endured solely because of the spiritual implications that they were made to believe. And she literally had a bullwhip and drove the workers herself with a bullwhip, and would be, out there making sure quotas were being met, and everything was being, portioned out. And there are bizarre accounts of, people being woken up in the middle of the night to move from one sort of community house to another at regular intervals, and irregular intervals, just to prevent anybody from ever having really a sense of security. And there's an account of a man who escaped a makeshift dungeon and fled the island altogether. He rode to the mainland. Or
it's a weird thing to like want to not let your followers like feel secure and safe under your protection.
Mm-hmm.
Rather you like try to literally abuse them into submission instead. Like that almost never works. Like usually it's this like kind of situation where, I mean, you are their leader, but I feel like most cult leaders like don't openly abuse their members. It's like maybe behind closed doors, and then at one point they might they could fucking step up and slap one of their followers and be like, and no one is gonna say anything because they're like, hey dude, that guy deserved it because that's the cult leader right there or whatever, but if everyone is getting slapped every day and you guys just get treated like slaves instead of human beings who are supposed to be part of a cult,
seems counterproductive, right?
Definitely, I would say.
Well, you're gonna like this then, because the most extreme example I could find of things that she would do when the colony was in this state. She at one point was fond of getting people to try to drown themselves, to
what?
I guess as an experiment to find out more about the afterlife. So she would stand there and order people to try to drown themselves, and they would try. That's how much they believed in all of this, and that's wildly disturbing.
Legit. I want to really. I wish I could go back in time and see that happening. That sounds like a great idea for a bit. You know what I mean? Just Madam Z
Standing there with a bullwhip. Yeah,
trying to get you to drown yourself so you could I don't think these guys are all right, so here's the plan. We're gonna go down to the creek and we're gonna play a game. It's who can hold their breath underwater the longest until they get to heaven first. First one to get to heaven and then come back wins. And they're just kind of looking at each other I don't think that's possible. I don't think I can actually drown myself physically. And she's just that's weird. And she holds the bullwhip right there, kind of just itching her head with it. And she's but it's just a game. It's not drowning yourself. Okay, it's holding your breath until you get to heaven underwater.
Yeah,
we're trying to do some experimentation, Jeffrey, and you're out here thinking I'm trying to get you to kill yourself. You know that's a sin, bud. You know that's not what I'm trying to do. Now, why don't you just get in the water, hold your head under there until you die, or I will beat you with this bullwhip. And then you can just stay in the water and die anyway. So Jeffrey is how did that end up? What was the results of that? Did people
not a lot of good options for them, eh?
Did they die?
I wasn't able to read anything about anybody successfully drowning themselves. There was the suggestion that she would. Yeah, there was the suggestion that she would help them finish the job.
Yeah, I would expect that. It's kind of like, maybe it was like, all right, let's just play the game. Who can hold their breath the longest? And then it's like, all right, I can. Yeah, me, Madam C, watch, I can do it. And then they're doing it. And then it's like, she just like stands on their back. And she's like, I really, really want you to win. I don't know. Like, I just don't know how the conversation goes down. Like, let's get you guys to drown yourself in the
so hard
sake
to imagine,
of
right?
science.
It's unsurprising then that we've kind of hit something of a pinnacle of crazy here. Unsurprising that in 1932, the colony experiences full-blown dissent and revolt. So colony members rise up and corner Brother 12 and Madam Z and sort of demand answers. And it's the beginning of the end, more or less. So there's the dissolution of the complex. Members are banished, quote unquote, to the mainland. There's a couple accounts of them renouncing Brother 12, but still being so caught up in everything he had to say and everything he had to write that they continue on with their own offshoot cult on the mainland. Mainland being Vancouver Island, still the bigger island. But without members, there's not so much a colony can do. So it's in 1933 that the nails in the coffin come about. These court cases about more of the same. Court cases designed to recover misused contributions. And our friend Mary Wortham Connolly, again, is one of these people. And another Alfred Henry Barley was a major contributor who took legal action in 33. And this was the biggest case yet. And a lot of testimonies from disciples and members of the colony, and a lot of people just came right out and confirmed that yes, Brother 12 and this cult was about black magic. He attempted to use black magic on a regular basis to kill his enemies by covert means, to kill government officials, holding bizarre rituals, the whole gamut. He wasn't there, of course, to defend himself for these cases because he and Mabel / Zura / Madam Z had by this point demolished the vast majority of the complex with equipment and dynamite, and sunken his sailboat into the ocean and escaped the island complex altogether on a tugboat, fled the country, changed their names again, with hundreds of thousands of dollars missing and all the jars of gold coins missing. And the record of their activities, or Brother 12's activities, more or less end here, with a very interesting exception of 1934, so another year into the future. The only manner in which he resurfaces is in the form of a death certificate in Switzerland, signed by a Dr. Roger August Schmidt. So there's no record of his body being anywhere, but there's this death certificate in Switzerland that was signed for him. And of course, Dr. Roger August Schmidt is a former Foundation and Colony member. So pretty suspicious, especially considering there are credible sightings of Brother 12 that continue years into the future.
And this speaks to something else. Like if we want to touch back on something real quick, it's the gold. Okay, the 43 jars of gold, and how that's been a huge lure for modern day like treasure seekers. And there's this big thing that you see, like a guy found in a false door. He actually found a crinkled piece of paper.
Yes.
And it says on the piece of paper, "For fools and traitors, nothing."
Yes.
Like, how did no one
in the
remember?
60s, right?
Yeah. how did no one read that and think dude took all the money? Like, there's not a jar left. Okay, he's not gonna. For anyone who abandoned the cult and then thinks, oh, maybe I can go back and get the gold now that no one's there, he must have left some jars of gold. He's like, nah, for fools and traitors, like for fools who think I didn't take this money, and for the traitors that are gonna come back and like try to get my money after they just like try to diss me, like, nah, bruh, I'm taking my gold, I'm leaving. I think it makes perfect sense. I would be like, and then the suspicious part about it all is the fact that we're seeing a guy who's a founding member, a dude who just happens to live in like one of the most like sketchy countries. I mean, Switzerland isn't like necessarily sketchy, but when you think of like offshore bank accounts, I feel like you think of Switzerland. Okay. I feel like anyone doing crime has an offshore bank account in Switzerland. Okay. It's just like, that's totally like stereotyping criminals. I'm sure you guys all use like other banks, but you know, criminals listening to the podcast, you know, let us know what banks you guys use. No, I'm kidding. No, but seriously, to talk about that, I just think like, dude, yeah, guys out in Switzerland, like next thing you know, we don't see a dude for like some amount of years, and then he just dies. And like, how does he die? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that is on the record of on the death certificate. It was some sort of organ failure, if I recall. Nothing particularly interesting. Something pretty mundane that would be difficult to disprove. Maybe, I guess, was the idea if it was fraudulent.
Not difficult with a body, right? Like,
true. Yes.
The dude's dead, period. It's like he died by organ failure. It's like, well, I think he faked his death and you're lying to me. It's like his body's right there on the autopsy table, bro. It's like, right. Or is it? You rip his dead face right off the skull and you're like, oh, damn, I thought that was going to be a mask. And it's like, nope, you just ripped a decaying corpse's face right off. Nah, dude, it'd be so awkward. You're like, I knew it was a fake, and you just like pull the decayed skin, just kind of slides off the skull hella easily, and you're like, I
mean, it wouldn't be horribly out of character. I mean, for this story.
Right. I mean, no, I would, like I said, man, this story needs to be made into a movie. Like,
and so much there, right?
And it can't be no scary like cult movie. Okay, it's got to be funny. It's got to be about how Brother 12 is the greatest scam artist of the 20th century. Okay, like he is better than the Ponzi guy. He's better than any other dude who ran a scam, because homeboy just like literally scammed people with black magic and then faked his death. And I could already just see the end of the movie, like them seeing him dead, and then it's like actually him like on a boat somewhere, like on the Nile River, like smoking a doobie, you know, chilling. I don't know, like he's
wearing a pharaoh's headdress.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then he gets beat up for cultural appropriation in Egypt because it's actually a Muslim country. And it's like, dude, Egyptian gods like aren't even like could you imagine if you went to Egypt and thought like, I am your pharaoh, and they're like all Muslim and stuff, and they're like, dude, what? They all start throwing stones at him and like stoning him to death. They're like, get out of here, dude.
Yeah, man, I don't think there would have been a lot of tolerance for that at all in the 20s or 30s.
Yeah, especially in a Muslim country. Not to, not dissing any Muslim country. Shout out Afghanistan. But, like, I feel like when you see things like that, you're kind of like, they're not the most tolerant places on earth. And so it's like a Muslim country which is already a super intolerant place to like things that they don't like. But then put it in the 1930s where like everywhere is intolerant. Okay, like no one likes anyone. So it just would make sense that you're like, yeah, I feel like he definitely avoided going to Egypt because he knew like
Could be,
people
yeah.
would they saw him as a threat. He's probably somewhere in South America, chilling. He's probably dead actually as of now.
Certainly, yeah, unless he used his black magic to prolong his
Live.
life.
I mean, hey, if he became an ascended master, theoretically speaking, like the other homeboy,
Yeah, that's I don't know that anything will ever come out. Enough time has passed now. I mean, besides the secret compartments in the note that you mentioned there, the only real thing on the record is I read that in 1956 someone was exploring the ruins, I guess, of the complex, and in the building that used to be the building he would use to commune with the Great White Lodge, so his personal spiritual shrine type structure. In the attic of this building was found a collection of ritual implements, including a human skull that had been carved into a bowl. And of course, it was rigorously tested and shown to have belonged to a woman in her 20s who would have died in the early 30s. So, of course, poor Myrtle comes to mind. But, whoever it was, certainly. It's pretty grim, pretty damning of what was going on. Overall.
As bad as the Myrtle situation really is, and I'm like, she was the first girl he convinced to be a goddess like incarnate, right?
Well, yeah, he had his family originally, and then at least one other not wife before Myrtle. But the whole reincarnation business.
The whole incarnate thing was her. So that being said, I feel like not that anyone deserves death, all right? But I'm just gonna say this: if you're out here like getting manipulated into thinking you're a god by some other person, and then you leave your already successful husband, who's like a doctor in New York or wherever that Myrtle's husband lived at, and you have this like super set up situation, why would you leave that and then do all this stuff? And then, and then you're not able to give a kid to this guy who said, you're supposed to give me a kid. So he Henry VIII you. And
yes, he does.
Now we're drinking rosé from your skull. I would hope. What did they actually drink from the skull? They drank wine, right?
Probably. I don't know if that was confirmed at any point.
Or was it blood?
They were able to discern that it was, in all likelihood, carved the way it was for the purpose of drinking, but I don't know if they were able to tell what had been.
I feel like it was like the hardest working, they probably had like the hardest working kid, on the compound. And it was like some, kind of like that Promised Neverland, you know what I mean? It's this funny little like anime freaking show that's about like these kids who live on a compound and they all think they're gonna get adopted, but really it's like the kids with the highest test scores are like kept away as like prized meat for this like the one who eats these kids. And like the kid with the lowest score, like, oh, you're getting adopted today. And it's like, what? I got adopted. I'm going to go live with my new adopted foster family. And she goes to leave and the kids are all like, oh no, like Connie left her little bunny. So they go to like run it to her. And then they realize Connie is dead. And Connie then gets eaten by like a demon. And it's like, oh wow, that's literally so whack. But that's kind of like the idea that I have in my head for what's going on here. They're like the kids that they're supposed to protect, okay, probably sacrificing the least hardest working one, the one who like isn't doing the jobs that they want the ones that they're all like supposed to be the prize to like, hey man, this kid ain't gonna be no future leader. Let's just, and have ourselves a little sip out of good old Myrtle,
When you put it like that, it sounds almost jovial, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. It's probably way more sinister and messed up
But
than even that. But
yeah, it just goes to show like how disturbingly magnetic he must have been, to have convinced people so completely of such wild things and to get them to commit so much of themselves and their lives to
yeah,
him, this cause, and this message of his, this utopian apocalyptic message, and the reincarnation stories. Like it seems supernatural for sure, the amount of influence he had, especially considering the stories from the courtrooms and the testimony of his disciples and members afterwards.
yeah.
Just coming right out and saying it. He worked black magic. He was able to manipulate things, manipulate people.
It's a shame that we're not there, and it's not a time closer to us where we can talk to someone who was in this cult. Like, if there are any surviving members of the Brother 12 cult out there at all, I doubt it, but
well, you never know. Maybe at the very least, there's people who knew them, or people who were their children. There was more than 8,000 members at the very apex of the foundation, or the cult's development, however you want to term it.
Yeah, man, that's a lot of people.
The story, that's a lot of people throughout the world.
Yeah,
a lot of people.
8,000 people that possibly have descendants. We could still possibly track some people down and say, hey, old grandpappy used to tell me about that Brother 12 cult back in the day. I used to thought he was just crazy. That's why I always hit him with a stick. I'm like, what? Hey, your grandpa with a stick? Nah, but some people really be doing that kind of stuff, abusing elderly. It's wrong.
Sure.
Don't do that. But other than that, we want to hear from these elderly people out there, if possible. If anyone listening to this
firsthand,
yeah, definitely reach out. Let us know. Maybe it's a thing. We just you gotta schedule a little field trip for yourself. Go down to good old,
Yeah. I wish I'd found out about it earlier on. I only found out about it in my last couple months living there.
And you just go back there though, and go to the local old folks home, and see if you can visit and just say, it kind of, I don't know how it would work down there dealing with COVID restrictions, but back in the day, I remember being really interested in World War II. My dad was like, hey, I have an idea. Let's go down to the old folks home and learn about World War II firsthand. I was like, how are we going to do that? And he literally drove down to the old folks home. There's this place called Riverside down here where I'm at. And it's we walk in there, and he literally just walked up to the front counter and was like, hey, you guys have anyone here who was in World War II? She's like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure. And went and looked and found a guy and was like, yo, yeah, he was in World War II. And we just talked to him about it. But I bet it was go up there and be like, hey, anyone in here who was in the Brother 12 cult? She's like, oh yeah, we got a couple of those guys in the back. They all sit at a table, played chess and checkers together all the time, talking about the good old days, sipping wine out of a skull.
Yeah, man, it's not so far in the past that the story's necessarily completely over. I encourage anybody who found the story, just the superficial telling of it, interesting to do some further reading. There's a lot of coverage out there, especially because of the recent real estate listings that we pointed out at the start. But it's received so much coverage over the years. There's a really great book by John Oliphant called Brother 12. He's got a website, brother12.com. There's
Yep.
Ronald McIsaac's Brother 12, the Devil of DeCourcy Island. There's a lot of pseudoscientific reviews of his writings and his theosophy, which again we're not really gonna get into, and we haven't got into. That's not what's interesting or unexplained about it. But there's books as well. I didn't really want to look too much into them because it says outright anytime that they came up that they were written by an ex-con claiming to be Brother 12's biological brother.
Wow.
For the sake of getting these books out there, but they're books on Brother 12 and reviews of his writings.
I think
so just from all angles. Heavily covered. Times Colonist, National Post, stuff at Vancouver Island University, like local records. There's a lot out there. So definitely, as we mentioned from the outset, not as talked about anymore, at least as it could be.
It's something that's like talking about to touch on next week or our next episode being when it is, but when we touch on the topic that we're going to touch on next week or whenever, it's really going to be heavy in the metaphysical space. And I just want to kind of touch on the fact that people like this guy who run these metaphysical theosophical cults and stuff, it's that's one of the most popular things coming out right now, especially with new age consciousness being as popular as it is. There's a few people I know, I have people who are pretty interested in talking to us about that. So next week we might actually have someone who might be able to join us in a discussion on the whole discussion of that down there. They're someone who's extremely knowledgeable in not just what we're going to be touching on, but in conspiracies in general and in hidden knowledge. He's someone who spends a lot of time looking and taking extensive notes, extensive research on these topics, and I think it's going to be something that a lot of you guys are going to like. Really cool dude, so going to be excited for that. Other than that, and I want to just say this too, I've never spent so much time looking at websites that I would have never ever thought I'd be on. You know what I mean? The ones that just look like they were made in 2003 and never got right. And I was like, wow, bro. But I respect it, and I find myself fortunate to be in this situation with you guys and to be giving you guys information that we're giving. But yeah, that's pretty much that's it from me. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean that's the story. We could go on and on, but we don't want to do too much more than outline things and the mystery surrounding them. So by all means, again, reach out, join the conversation. Variety of methods. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the website, links in the description. There's a lot of other discussions happening, and check out Brother 12 on your own. If you're interested at all, there's lots of sources besides the ones that we provided. So give them a look.
Also, don't be afraid to start your own theosophical society.
Don't be afraid.
I'm not calling it a cult because I don't want to tell anyone to start a cult, but don't be afraid to be different like Brother 12. Okay, I think
not exactly like him.
Don't be like him.
Don't be like him.
But be like him in a sense of being outside of the box like everyone else. You know what I mean?
Sure.
We can compare Brother 12 to someone like Elon Musk because, Elon Musk isn't a dangerous person, but we could say that Elon Musk is unconventional in a way of how he does things. Yeah. He was successful. I don't know, but Brother 12 had 43 jars of gold coins, bro. So that sounds like success to me. I'm just going to say that, Paracon podcast, Paranormal Conspiracy podcast. Check us out. Join the Discord. We're probably gonna have like our own page for the show, like up, like a Twitter or something. I might get something like that started for us. Other than that, really, that's it. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thanks
All
for looking a little deeper with us.
All right. Well, until next time. Peace
Until next
out.
time.